Are you ready for this one? What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Another new build on the bench. If you can't tell by the title of the video, most likely, and the tiny picture on the side of the box, we're working with the new Rock Pirates chassis. I believe this is called the Interceptor. And what we've got inside of this package that arrived today is a handful of parts. But this here is the Rock Pirates chassis. They've made other parts in the past, and they just recently decided to release their own chassis. So I saw this at Axial Fest West, decided to pick one up. I bought this on their website the other day, shipped quick, got it in hand. It also comes with a bent aluminum Panhard mount, so that's nice that they do include that with the chassis kit. Chassis kit was pretty reasonably priced. There's no hardware or anything in here. There's just a piece of paper dividing the two halves, and there's a little sticker pack in there along with that mount. I also picked up the dual servo mount, or the servo spacer mount, whatever you want to call it, for the front. So you have place for a winch servo as well as the steering servo. I bought the rear Power Wagon specific bed. This is a cool piece. This is something that is what drew me to it a little bit more. We are going to go with the Power Wagon style. No surprise, but you know, they look good. I just sold one of my other Power Wagon builds, so it's time to build a new one. This is a CNC cut bent aluminum bed that kind of cleans up the rear, so you can run a cab but not have it look so plain and empty. Looking forward to that. And then I also picked up their rock sliders, which are also the Power Wagon specific ones. I'll be using all of this in conjunction with a VS410 Phoenix portal kit. Now I was going to run the F10 portal axles anyway, and you can buy the axles as a separate kit, but I also was going to run the VFD transmission, shocks, drive shafts, all of that. So by the time I would have bought all of those things together, you can actually just buy the whole kit cheaper, and it comes with links, the shocks, transmissions in there. This has the VFD twin transmission, which I'm going to go ahead and put in this setup with all of the functions, but I'm going to try and do my best to keep it fairly light, as this is a flat rail style build. But again, we have the links, the shocks, everything's included here, drive shafts as well. And then with what's left over, can sell that off and be even lower in the budget. So this makes it a pretty easy deal, in the, you know, the easiest way to get into a build like this with all of the parts you need. And there's a bunch of hardware in here too. Since none of this comes with any hardware, that will likely come in handy. Might make some of the parts to sell off a little short on hardware here and there, but you know, depending on what you already have on hand, can help you make some decisions. I'm gonna break open this kit. I'm gonna build the axles, the transmission, get the skid plate ready, get my shocks built likely, have everything ready here before I start assembling the new chassis. I think that'll make it the easiest to think through. So we're gonna quick cut to when that is complete, and then we'll take a look at opening this stuff up, seeing what we need to get done. Went through, did a quick assembly of the front axle, the rear axle, the links, the VFD twin transmission, and the shocks. So all of our prerequisites to assembling the chassis are completed. Now it's time to actually start opening up these Rock Pirates RC parts and start to kind of put these things together, see how this all works out, see how close to using the standard links we are, whether we're gonna have to change the Panhard link, the steering link, any of that stuff. Don't really know. Again, no instructions with something like this. So maybe there's something on the website that I haven't checked. If we run into anything, we'll do that. But we'll start bolting things up by putting the skid plate on first, and then seeing how we need to get the chassis tapered in, assembled, all that. Should be the easy part. Start there. All right, let's talk about where we're sitting at now and some of just the little characteristics about this build so far. Now, again, we built the F10 axles, the VFD twin transmission. The VFD twin transmission, the bolt pattern on the side of the skid plate is basically the same as like SCX-10-2, SCX-10-1, the Element. They all use very similar, so not all the exact same, but generally if one bolts up, another will bolt up. This bolted up pretty simply as far as the skid plate into the chassis, and also with these Power Wagon specific rock sliders that you see there. And then getting this front servo mount put into the chassis, also straightforward. Now the chassis will have a little bit of a taper, so when you put the servo mount in there, there's going to be a little bit of a space, but just put the screws in and tighten it all down until it cinches close. The one thing is that you will have the Panhard mount to install. Now there's two locations that you can have it install, and it will slide front to back on either with a little bit of adjustment before you finally lock it down. I kind of went through that, adjusting it to make sure that my Panhard bar, which is the one that goes from the chassis side down onto the axle, was lined up about where I wanted it to be, and that it cleared everything on the suspension and the axle throughout the travel. Now the shock towers, you can see, have lots of hole locations. I'm using the stock 80mm S8E incision shocks from the Phoenix Portal kit, and just chose a shock position that gives me the travel that I was after with everything still clearing. Everything went pretty well together there. Now I will give one of my first complaints about the chassis, and I've talked to RC Rock Pirates about this already, and that is that they use a 4mm hole for the shock mounting positions. I've talked to them and they told me their rationale. I still don't agree with it. These holes feel super sloppy where the shock actually bolts into. They said it's for being able to adjust the the body post mounting that they sell separately as well, and just being able to move things around a little bit. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's a good design trait to have. They use a more properly toleranced hole in other locations around the chassis for attachment of other things. They just use these oversized holes on the shock mounting. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. It's not something that I think is a trait that I would continue on with in my products personally, but it's something that they have decided to go with. And I've also seen it in some of their other shock towers that they sell for like SCX3s and things like that. Again, personal preference thing on their side and mine. I'm on the other side of the fence from the side that they're residing on. But it's a small gripe. It's not a deal killer. Once you have the shocks on there, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're just a person, when you're putting things together, it just doesn't feel right. And that's part of the area where I have. Now, setting up the front end, which is generally the only tricky part of any of these trucks, it wasn't perfectly smooth. Now, different servos have different heights as far as where the mounting tabs are to where the face of the servo is. Now, I'm using a Futaba here, which is generally one of the options that has worked well for me in many cases, or in a lot of chassis in general. And I had major interference issues with their Panhard mount at almost full extension. So as to try and get any compression of the shocks, it was just starting to bend the rod end, physically having to force it out of the way to make it work. So I ended up having to put about a 3mm spacer under each post or corner of the servo to get it to clear. And now it clears right up until full compression of the passenger side alone. It does start to make contact. Not so bad that I have much of an issue with it though. Now, one bonus is that the Panhard mount and the steering link all fit exactly the same as they did on the VS410. So if you're using a link set like I did from the VS410, specifically made for this type of transmission and axle setup, you're golden. No extra parts needed. It's just a simple bolt-on situation, which is nice. A lot of people are after something like that. They don't want to have to source links and whatnot. So that was simple. Like I said, the Power Wagon specific sliders, which when I say that, it means that it actually fits the contour of the body. So as you put it on there, it's got a nice little fit. You can tell. Nice to have something like that. Once you bolt those in, it does determine the location of your body as well. So, you'll need to figure out body mounting still, and we're going to get into that, talking broad strokes still at this point. Now, for the rear. I didn't have a rear chassis cross brace. I stole this one that I've got currently in there out of one of the Element chassis that I had laying around. But without having that, I didn't have anything that worked there. And this rear bed, which I thought might kind of function as its own cross brace, does not. It's made to be kind of universal to fit in SCX-102 chassis and Element chassis. but it doesn't necessarily drop right into their own chassis, which I feel like could be a modification would be made to allow it to just drop simply onto this. This is called the Hardline Bed, by the way, which should be fairly easy to find on their site. And of course, I'll link to everything I'm using below, so just in case you do have any questions. So we need to get this mounted still. It's got these tabs that hang off of the edge, but those don't sit down far enough to meet up with the holes on the side of the chassis. So I think I'm actually going to cut those off flush. And then there's a bolt pattern there in the center, which that's what I'm going to end up using to mount this to the chassis. What I think that I'm going to do is draw up a chassis brace for the rear that will then allow this to mount to it back there. Now, one other, I don't know that it's odd, it's just a little weird. There's a nice edge here to the back side of this, and it matches up pretty well with the angle of their rear shock towers on this chassis. That's a bonus, and that's obviously purposeful. They've got it written right in the description of the part. I'm actually going to remove this cross brace completely and show you a little bit of what I'm looking at with this. So with that cross brace totally removed, you can now slide this back into the lateral position, and it'll fit right around that point. Once those tabs are cut off the side, it'll allow to sit flush against the sides of the bed. And then once we drop the body in place, you'll see roughly the look that we'll have there. But the one thing that I was saying that it's a little odd is just that there's this kind of an awkward gap here on the back side. Once you have a bumper and such, it's not going to be terrible. It's a little weird. And I've seen in some of the photos they have on their website, it's to clear like the rear chassis braces that exist on like a stock Element chassis, things like that. So it's made to be a little bit more uniform. Hopefully they come up with something that is maybe a little bit more fit to their chassis to make a more of a full look. Maybe something that bolts up easily over the sides of the chassis or on the inside, whatever it may be, to try and make this a little bit more of a complete kit. It's close. There's little things. It's just, they're working with things that they made for other chassis, and then they made their own chassis, and not everything's 100% just a flowing program. But overall, it's about one of the simplest flat rail setups like this that I've put together. Pretty straightforward. A little bit of spacing, a little bit of configuring here and there, but the fact that I was able to drop a set of axles, transmission with pre-existing links that worked properly on a chassis like this is a great start. Makes it easy for someone who maybe hasn't done this before to just dive in without feeling too overwhelmed about having to figure out link positions and all that. It's not that bad. This is definitely one of the easier ones to go with, and having the options for sliders that bolt right on for popular bodies. You can't deny the popularity of the Power Wagon body. So this is one that I've obviously had around. It's made it on a few rigs previously. I've got a new one ordered that will get painted up for here. I'm probably even going to paint it myself. What? We are going to need bumpers still for this, as the location that these sliders dictate our body sits in is, flush with the front of the chassis, which makes things simple. I like that. And then the rear, maybe we don't need a bumper itself. Maybe we'll just leave that length of chassis extending behind the back of this bed. We'll figure that out. Because I'm going to get this rear cross brace designed and get that 3D printing, get the bed mounted in place, get the body mounting sorted out, and get some wheels and tires installed on this. Picked up some of the J Concepts Tusk tires, I believe. We're going to throw those on. I have to decide on a color scheme that I'm going to go for with the new body so I can pick the wheels that I want to run as well. And then, of course, we've got bumpers to make and electronics to install. Now, I did go with the VFD Twin, which has a dig out of the box as well as selectable overdrive. So we're going to be able to go from 6.5% overdrive to like 43% overdrive. I have been testing some micro servos for shifting the VFD for a while. Found some that worked all right, but do like to stay in that 120 plus range. And the micros seem to be a little bit more finicky, so the more power, the better if you're going for micros. Any of the parts that I designed, like the rear cross brace that I'll have, as well as possibly whatever I come up with for shifting of the VFD twin in a chassis like this. I'll share those files so you can 3D print them yourself as well, if that is something you're after. If you have suggestions for the theme of this, let me know. Open to ideas, thinking something like movie related. Red Apple cigarettes or something. I don't know. Throw your ideas below. We still have a list of things to do, but this truck came together really quickly, and you know, this is the hard part of a flat rail build typically. So kind of got through all the hurdles up front. Now it's just some detail stuff. Let's get this thing finished off well though, make this a good looking truck. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like these videos, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. You know the deal. With that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Are you ready for this one? Pirate jokes. Get used to them. Are you ready for this one? Can't get it. Can't get. Are you ready? Are you ready for this one?